Joining us right now is Dr. Scott Wright. He's the study leader for the Mayo Clinic Plasma Program. He's also director of Mayo's Human Research Protection and is a cardiologist. And Doctor, thank you so much for being with us today. There's so much excitement around this potential treatment. We're very happy to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of this study led by my colleague, Dr. Michael Joyner, and co-led by several of us at Mayo Clinic.
You know, there has been some confusion about just how effective the plasma treatments are. That number of 35% reduction in mortality, did that come from the Mayo Clinic?
I believe, because the FDA hasn't exactly told us either where that precise number came from, but my best guesstimate of that is that they integrated data that we have provided to them, that you have likely seen in a preprint that Dr. Joyner and colleagues put online, plus additional data that we analyzed and sent to them after the submission of the preprint, plus additional data they've incorporated from other sources around the United States. So it's an amalgamation or an integration of data, and probably is a conservative estimate of all of the data that they have.
What was your reaction to the FDA's emergency use announcement that it put out this weekend surrounding this plasma treatment?
Well, we were delighted they reached a decision about whether to issue an emergency use authorization or not. We've been working with them closely since late March in the design of this study, the conduct of this study. We initially thought, Becky, the study would enroll about 5,000 patients in the U.S., largely providing plasma in hospitals where clinical trials were not being conducted. Much to our surprise and frankly our delight, we've enrolled over 103,000 patients. And in June, we began sending them data not only on safety, but also preliminary signals of potential benefit or lack of benefit for them to start analyzing so they could make a determination about whether we continued with the expanded access program, closed it, or whether they transitioned to an emergency use authorization. So we've been in discussions with them for several months. We're delighted they've reached a decision. I don't believe this was a rushed decision or a pressured decision because they've been rather methodical and, looking at the data over several months. And so I don't see this as a rushed decision. And we're frankly delighted that they've come to this conclusion because it now makes plasma available to every patient and every hospital in the U.S. and its territories.
We have been citing the study with 35,000 people. It sounds like you are doing a much broader study of 105,000 people at this point. I don't want to put words in your mouth,
yes,
but it sounded like you were saying that they were being almost conservative in their estimates that it cut mortality by 35%. Is that what you think, that based on what you've seen since, it could be even better than that?
I think their data is more mature and more precise. Generally, first estimates of data are broader and a bit higher than the actual refinement of the data. It's true with clinical trials, and it's true with all kinds of data. This is a fast-moving target. The assays that we are using to look for signals of efficacy were only developed in June and have been applied. And we haven't been able to analyze the entire 35,000 patients with the assays because of the mechanics of getting blood samples and having the proper kinds of samples from the convalescent plasma. So the analysis is based on a smaller subset. And please recognize that likely half of the patients that we've enrolled came in between the 1st of July and now, so we don't have 30-day follow-up data. So we made a decision around the 5th of July to use that as the last date of entry when we did the analysis that we sent off to a medical journal. So that's why we have slightly different numbers, and they have more up-to-date data as well as data. They validated our data. They sent it to institutes like the Broad and did other places and didn't always tell us where they were validating it, which is, of course, their prerogative and it's appropriate. And they've come to this conclusion. I saw one figure on Twitter showing how they derived that. And what they basically are saying is that if you received convalescent plasma that has a high level of immune activity and received that plasma in the first 3 days of your hospital stay, your in-hospital mortality was substantially lower, a relative risk reduction of about 35% compared to patients who got convalescent plasma at the same time but the plasma had low levels of immune titers. So it's not like a clinical trial where there's a definitive proof. It's more of an observed difference in reductions or a difference in mortality, and it's sort of a signal of efficacy that I think that a clinical trial would likely proceed on and power their study based upon that initial efficacy determination.